GM, just a quick one before we get going. So, as you know, the Blockmates podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Certainly shouldn't be considered as financial advice. We have absolutely no idea what we're talking about half the time. So, any investment decision you do make should be based on your own research and your own understanding of the risks involved. One more thing as well, there's around 50% of people who listen regularly who aren't subscribed yet. So, if you please could just do us a favor and hit the subscribe or the follow button or the like button, helps content grow, helps us grow, helps it reach more people like yourselves, and it means the world to us as well. So that's the last I'll ask of you. So yeah, let's get to the episode. All right, we're back. We've got Derek from Mantle. We've tried to do this in Singapore, took 2049, but a few things came up, and I think it's worked out better anyway because we get to redistribute it across all of our social channels now in video and audio format. So, but Derek, how are you doing?
Hey Grant, thanks for having me here. Doing great myself. Apologies for the previous time token, right? So I actually sliced open my finger, and I was rushing to look for first aid at a very crowded event, right? And yeah, but yeah, glad to do it here with you on this podcast here.
Yeah, I hope you're okay, and I hope it was it wasn't too brutal because there was so many people there, so
Yeah,
many.
yeah,
It
it
was
was pretty intense. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, you guys had a right nice front and center booth as well, which is like great for kind of traction. But I suppose you guys must have been rushed off your feet at all times. So yeah, the last thing you needed at that time was us annoying you to get a short interview in.
no, I think it would be great to chat with you there in real life, right? But yeah, it was a really busy time. I spoke to many great projects, great founders, and yeah, just love connecting with people. Yeah, given the current market conditions, right, it's really heartening to see actually so many people still building strong in this
Yeah.
space.
Yeah, it was a good atmosphere and a good kind of vibe. I thought, despite the past 18 months has been pretty brutal across the board, but everyone seemed very optimistic. I don't know what you picked up from the kind of atmosphere and vibe though.
As mentioned, it was really heartening, right? Because everyone was really optimistic for the future in terms of what they're building, right? And I think that I can't say for sure, but I would like to think that this space is starting to consolidate inequality, right? Where
Mm.
people who manage to really govern their overhead properly and do the right things, right, are starting to stay and survive, right? So when we have builders like that, I think hopefully in the next few years or maybe months to come, even we can see the fruits of those labor, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. So before we get into it, can you just give the listeners a bit of kind of background on yourself, how you've got up to this point, where you are with Mantle, and maybe like your kind of role in day to day at Mantle as well? That'd be great to set the scene, I think.
Yeah, sure. I think my entry point into uh, crypto itself is pretty interesting. So after I graduated from university, right, by the way, which I did a degree in sociology for. So it's pretty, I would say I don't know that many people who did sociology, in university that are in crypto now. But I think it's helped me a lot with, in terms of looking at ecosystems, right? Because that's what we do in sociology. But yeah, so after I graduated from university, I actually became a teacher, or educator. I taught students in the junior college level, right, in Singapore. So I think that equates to sixth form college, I think, in the UK.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
basically,
100%.
17, 18-year-olds, right? Yeah. Did that for 2 years. Um, and on the side, invested in crypto as well. I think one of the first few was Solana. I think, yeah. And obviously it did really well because at the point where it was just up only, right? And that concept really fascinated me. Like I was wondering, what this was all about, and I actually dived deep into the tech behind everything, right? And as cheesy as people like to think it is, right? But I really was hooked on because of the tech, right? At that point, for someone who loves sociology like me, right, it's quite jading sometimes when you look at society, right, all the inequality, the injustice. But at that point, there was nothing more pure, right, than a nascent technology, right, looking to rise up and make their mark on the world, right, and that was what crypto was at that point of time. And yeah, it was really interesting for me to dive deep into this space, and I really enjoyed it, right? And because I enjoyed it so much, I decided to, just take a leap of faith. I broke my bond. I was a crypto journalist at Tech in Asia, right? At the very start, after I left the teaching sector, right? From there, I went to Bybit. Um, headed up their crypto insights department, then left for Spartan, right? Headed up the research unit for Spartan Labs, which is the venture studio arm of Spartan. And then from there, I've come to Mantle to lead the ecosystem research unit here. So
Nice.
there's a quick nutshell of my journey.
Quite a journey. Yeah, that's a really interesting point on the sociology aspect. I was gonna ask you if that what's because there's always those kind of crossovers. Like from a past life, I was supposed to be a research scientist doing like cancer research, and now I'm like
Oh,
in this industry. But
right.
it's a weird one because there's certain skills you pick up in a previous life which you'd never ever in a million years think were transferable. And we do a lot of research and like going really in depth. It
Mm,
lends itself so well, but I'd never in a million years thought that would have been of benefit. So, is there anything
right.
like in particular? I know you mentioned ecosystems. Is there anything kind of further that you've kind of picked up from the whole sociology aspect?
Yeah, I think for sociology, because it is the study of society, right? And
Hmm.
society is made up of many different components, right? You have the community, you have governance, consensus, things like that, and these are things we see, within blockchain ecosystems as well. Of course, I would argue, it's done on steroids, right? In the Web3 world, everything is just really accelerated, in terms of pace and growth. But at the core, I think the principles remain the same, right? So in terms of looking at um, whether it be it projects at the application layer or just the tech and infra layer, right? I think there is always something to bring over from sociology, actually. The
Hmm.
principles that we learn from studying societies of the past and present. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So for the uninitiated who might be coming into this slightly cold listening for the first time around, they've 100% heard of you guys. Like it'd be really difficult not to. You've got a great social presence, great presence across the industry. But is there anything that you could tell people that they might not know about the kind of origin stories of how Mantle has got up to the point of where it is today? Just to kind of give a bit of background, a bit of insight on that.
Right. So I think for most people, when they hear mental, right, they will, right away associate it with mental network, right, which is the L2, right? But I think as a quick overview, right, so mental is a DAO governed ecosystem, right, of decentralized and token governed technologies powered by our native token with the ticker MNT, right? So the entirety of the mental ecosystem comprises mental products like mental network, as mentioned, the L2, mental governance, which is the DAO. Previously, before the rebranding, it was called BitDAO, right? As well as the mental treasury. So MNT, right, which is mental token, is the unified product and governance token of the ecosystem. And what we're doing is really we're trying to pioneer a vision for more collaborative, decentralized economy to showcase the potential of tokenized governance. And I think flowing from that, our flagship product, Mental Network, is, for everyone out there, a quick nutshell, is a high performance EVM layer 2 blockchain built with modular architecture. So optimistic rollup technology coupled with modularity allows us to create a specialized, decentralized data availability layer called Mantle DA. And this really allows us to inherit security from Ethereum and offer much lower fees compared to industry standards. Yeah, so I think as with any blockchain ecosystem, we're currently focused on building up the application layer and really bringing more value to MNT holders through that.
How early was the vision to push into the L2 space? Was there any other kind of products that kind of got put to the side and you guys thought, right, we're going to lean heavily into this because it seems like, I mean, it's perfectly timed and perfectly executed in my opinion. But was there any other ideas that might have came to fruition in another world? Like, is there anything interesting there, or was it always we're going to build a network? It was just how are we going to build it, and then the L2 space came around, and that felt like the best fit.
Right, so I'll be honest, I can't answer that question because when I think they conceived of the idea, I was still in Spartan, right? So
Okay.
I wouldn't want to speak for them on that. But yeah, I think there were always plans for something like that, even back then.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So the what I found was really interesting what you were saying about data availability, and you guys leveraging EigenLayer, EigenDA, if I'm not mistaken, and
Yeah.
what additional benefits for someone who might have heard of EigenLayer because it's everywhere at the minute, but what is the value proposition that Mantle users and those participants in the ecosystem will benefit from directly?
Yeah, so when it comes to that, I won't speak purely about EigenLayer, but basically what we will allow for through this modularity would be hyper scalability, right? And really the ability to customize at the tech layer, right? So Ethereum will be our consensus and settlement layer, right? Wherein, as you mentioned, EigenLayer, once their mainnet is live, right, they will power our DA layer, right? For now, their technology is behind the Mantle DA, that is our DA layer, right? And Mantle Network itself is the execution layer. So in terms of benefits to users, right, apart from hyper scalability and lower fees, right, will really be in future the ability to stake your MNT, right, into the Mantle DA, the EigenDA nodes actually. So that's that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool, actually. That's I haven't seen that elsewhere, which is really interesting. In the L2 space, what do you think? What do you think's taken up a lot of mind share from builders, particularly at the infra layer? Do you think it's how do we get to a point where we decentralize the sequencer? Do you think it's fraud proofs? What's like immediately on a lot of builders and developers tick list to want to try and conquer?
So, for that, I wouldn't say that. Once again, I wouldn't want to speak for my team because for me, I'm more of the ecosystem side of things, right? For
Mhm.
technical research, I know we have a team, purely specialized for that. I wouldn't want to speak for them on this, but
Yeah,
they
yeah.
definitely are trying to research into the newer things in the space and always trying to pioneer for innovations to scale L2s. Yeah.
There's another basket of assets that seems to be on the tip of everyone's tongue, and it was very very topical at Token 2049, and we got to interview someone who was kind of leading the charge in this space, and I just want to get your opinion on real world assets and what are you seeing that's coming kind of into the ecosystem. What are your thoughts around it? Like short, medium, and long term. Have you got any kind of thoughts around it?
So I think RWA is a really generic term. It is a very broad category, right? That cuts across many verticals and sub verticals themselves, right? But I think as from larger from higher level standpoint, right? I think that RWA is a very difficult vertical to actually flourish in. I would say most players now are looking at T bills, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of tokenizing T bills and the likes of that. And I think that this space will probably stay within that realm, right? Like the likes of T bills and things like that, or straight bonds or the likes of that, right? For a long time, right? So I know of a lot of in the past there were narratives, lofty narratives, right, of tokenizing things like physical real estate, right,
Yeah.
or just tokenizing things like power grids, and making a change to the world and things like that. So that was the narrative that undergirded RWAs, right? But we're realizing now that I think that is really not feasible right now, right? So I would think that it would really stay within the realm of, as mentioned, T-bills, straight bonds, and the likes of that for the foreseeable future. So I think just to add on here, like why I think that's the case. If you look at real physical assets, right, why it's quite difficult to tokenize them with the lack of off-chain to on-chain oracles, right? Because there's this concept of GIGO, right? Garbage in,
Mm-hmm.
garbage out. Ultimately, blockchain is still a database, right? What you feed into that matters a lot, right? Especially if it's off-chain, right? So if you don't have, you know, another pillar of tech, which is IoT, right, Internet of Things, coming up in tandem with blockchain technology, it is really difficult to actually tokenize physical assets like real estate and things like that. The arbitrage opportunity there will be insane, right? It'll be a different kind of arbitrage that I don't think that we can handle. So yeah, I think the interim it will mostly be what I mentioned.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, do you think that this has kind of been spurred on in particular because a lot of on-chain yields have dissipated and obviously T-bills have been doing what T-bills have been doing? So do you think it's because of that inversion between the two and maybe there'll be less of a focus on it once volumes and incentives and things like that pick up back on-chain?
I think people are just looking for high quality of yields, right? So I think at the end of the day, it always boils down to quality of yield. um, because you can promise the highest APYs, but if your quality of yield is not secure or is not there, then there's no point to that, right? I think what really birthed the really insanely high APRs and APYs in DeFi summer was the whole concept of liquidity mining, right? But that in itself, right, is not, I wouldn't even consider it a source of yield. That is really just emissions for the sake of bootstrapping users and marketing, right? At the core of that, was there really a source of yield? I'm not so sure, right? But I think now people are moving towards more sustainable and more high quality sources of yield, and that is why we are looking to, some might call it TradFi instruments, right, to kind of bridge that into Web3, and I think people are seeing that, as the way forward for DeFi, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree, right? I think there must always be a marriage between Web2 instruments, with Web3 elements, and I think that's the best way we can empower our community and also to leverage this technology itself.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So we've obviously seen, I don't know where we are in this life cycle of this next kind of basket, but is there a focus for kind of consumer facing apps within the whole Mantle ecosystem? We've seen some murmurs with, well, Frentex captured a lot of kind of mind share and attention. There's been some derivatives of that. And I think there's even further afield, there's some really, really interesting stuff popping up that could fit into everyday life, just without abstracting away completely that someone's using any form of blockchain technology. And is there going to be a heavy focus from you guys to attract builders in that space, or is like how do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think at Mantle, obviously DeFi is a heavy focus for us, right? In both the aspects you mentioned, LDFi and RWAs. But the social realm is also, the social stack is definitely something that we are looking heavily into as well. In fact, I'm currently leading the charge on that, right, within the social stack. So overseeing, the ecosystem growth when it comes to the vertical. Um, so I think I argued at Token 249, right, that right now we have a very adequate infra stack across the ecosystem. I would think that because in the past few years, many infra projects have come up, right? L1s, L2s, L3s even, right? Have come up in recent times. And I think right now it's important to bolster the application stack, right? And one way to really bolster that, right, and to gain the holy grail of like mass adoption, right, which I think is still pretty far away, right? It would be actually via consumer apps, right? Because these are the ones that, as you mentioned, right, are able to hide the Web3 elements in the backend, right, and really be for the user, not for the sake of,
Mhm.
having like Web3 technologies just as a buzzword, right? And when we look at applications like Friend right? I think what they've done really well is to really build on something that is a proven model in Web2, right? Social media, people love sharing stuff, people love interacting with people that share good stuff, right? And they've done it in a way that incentivizes both parties, right? To for the content producers to share more, right? And for content consumers, right, to interact more with the content creators as well. So I think we are seeing how blockchain technology and tokenization can really help um, improve, right, the relationships between stakeholders uh, in such cases. And I think that we will see many more of that coming across different verticals actually. And we are closely monitoring that and tracking that and speaking to projects that are in that field. So I'm very excited for what's to come actually.
Yeah, it's kind of just felt like the perfect culmination of a few factors where people have had time to actually focus on building something. Its markets have been relatively flat, and then there's been the explosion of L2s and even some account abstraction stuff like Privy, which has enabled this, and it's just kind of culminated and
Yep.
all popped out of nowhere. And now it's quite refreshing because I'm just a complete DeFi nut, and I absolutely love it. But it's nice to see something that's completely fresh and new, and to kind of, because I think we were kind of getting to a point where we were moving the pieces around. And a lot of stuff was just rehypothecate and sort of looking the same. But I'm really, really encouraged by this kind of new wave of what actually could be. And I can't even think off the top of my head how far this could potentially go. So
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because when you look at consumer apps, right, it really is about managing relationships between different parties, right? And I think for many Web2 products, there are gaps and struggles in that domain. And like I mentioned, that's where I think tokenization uh, and by extension, game theory to some extent, right, can actually manage that really well. So I'm like you, right, really excited to see what's the next wave of such projects. And I think we have, you know, got to connect with many strong projects actually that are interested a bit on Mantle. So yeah, I cannot wait for that to happen actually.
Yeah, you guys are in a good position for that, I think. So I'm excited to see what happens. And is there anything that is like particularly personally piquing your interest? Is there any kind of emerging thing that you're seeing, or anything that's personally, just taking a lot of your mind share up and just thinking this is really interesting, or just anything that's personally of interest at the minute that we might not be seeing from the outside looking in?
So I cannot believe I'm saying this, right? I will not believe that I'll say this 1 year ago, but I want to talk about GameFi, right? Because so I think I just a few years back and just 1 year ago even, right? I was the biggest GameFi skeptic, honestly, right? One of my first pieces for Tech in Asia was about X Infinity, and I described actually how that game was right, perfect, ripe for a death spiral, right? Yeah, and we saw
Very
that,
true. And you were correct.
yeah, unfortunately, right, I was correct, but yeah, so that defined the first wave of GameFi, right? That really was led by pioneers like X Infinity, right? So no shade thrown at them, right? I think what they did was amazing, right? They pioneered a new model that many people are still following right now, right? They gave us, a way forward, trailblazers, if you might, right? And I think our job is to iterate on that and to improve on that, right? So I'm actually super heartened by what I'm seeing actually in this cycle, or at least right now when it comes to GameFi, right? And I honestly didn't think I'll be saying this because I really don't like the concept of gaming on blockchain, right? But I think a lot of people are realizing that now as well, and they are no longer trying to build games on blockchain tech itself, right? Because that is really really difficult, right? To build an on-chain game that is playable for the masses, right? So many people are realizing that now, and what they're doing is really using certain elements of Web3, right, to augment, right, what they cannot do in with Web2 infrastructure, right? So what I mean by that is, a lot of people are now building games, really fun games actually, right, on Web2 infrastructure, right, and then they are imbuing Web3 elements like, for example, their skins, there'll be NFTs, right? So that opens up really a kind of secondary market that I think is not was not present, right, in the Web2 world. Because for myself, I love Dota and CS:GO, right? We all traded skins and items back then. They didn't make us money, right? But there were many issues with that I think everyone knew about. Right, one thing would be very simple, right? They can just knock your items, and it has happened to me
Yep.
before, right? You lose a lot of value for that, and you can't be that capital efficient as well because there was no composability, right? And there was no interoperability between games and within mini games themselves, right? So that's something that I think will be perfect for Web3 elements, right? To solve for. So I think many games are starting to have that in their arsenal, and I think many strong studios are coming in as well with this mindset, with this approach. And I'm actually really excited to see the next wave of Web3 games pop up actually. So yeah.
I've kind of had the exact same thought process of you from like a similar kind of timeline as well. I mean, those days were great around Axie and everything was going crazy, and even stuff like I think there was one on Avalanche called Crabata, and they've like recently just closed shop. But if you think about what it was effectively yield farming with a couple of extra
Yep.
steps. It wasn't technically a game, but I'm I was in the same boat. I was really skeptical. Didn't think it was ever become a thing. But I've got a friend who works at GuildFi. I think they're based in Singapore, and he's just saying, "Look, it's coming. The right people are building, and we've been quite encouraged by what's happening. I would like to just like the basics of ownership of in-game assets just seems so perfectly fit. It's just like
Yep.
that's a match made in heaven. And I think like one of the original, I think it was a fake anecdote, but like Vitalik saying something about World of Warcraft and not being able to own his actual assets, and that kind of
Right.
got rogued, and that was one of the original reasons for why he wanted
Yep.
to create a like Ethereum. So it's kind of come full circle in a weird way, but yeah, I'm encouraged by it. I'd like to see what do you think that the immediate bottleneck is, and what do you think it's getting fixed? Is it games that are building and then creating an SDK so they can actually plug into it? Because you're probably going to be an expert in one and probably not an expert in the other, and there's kind of that void to fill. Have you got any kind of insight on that?
Yep. Okay. So, by the way, I didn't know that the World of Warcraft anecdote was fake. Is it really fake? Because I think there was a huge that was like it was quite shocking to me that it was fake actually. So, but yeah.
I don't know. It's a great
Okay.
story. I don't care if it's fake or real. So we just pretend it's
No.
real.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that is real. But yeah. So I think many things that they're solving for in the Web 2 world that I think that many people are excited for, right, will be just now I mentioned ownership, right? I think there are two other things that people are really excited about. So the first would be actually apart from game ownership, how they target their users, right? How they bootstrap users for games, right? That's something that I think Web3 elements can really change up for Web2 games, right? I think for Web2 games, they are extremely dependent on game publishers, right, to get their game out there. And if you don't have a strong publisher supporting you, I think it's really difficult to bootstrap users that organically, right? But what Web3 elements can do is they allow for a form of direct engagement, right, and direct incentivization that Web2 infrastructure cannot provide. So I give you an example. If let's say you register for this game, right, it's built on Web2, right, but you have a custodial wallet that you sign them up for automatically when they create this account, right? Then what you can do is then airdrop them, right, gems or skins or rewards or whatnot, right, whenever they hit a certain milestone in the game, right? That form of engagement, right, and then they can trade in the secondary market or with other instruments as well, right? So this kind of engagement, I think, really can benefit games if they tap on it properly, right? You can have whole new versions and iterations of go-to-marketing strategies, right? And that I think that can be very exciting for these games, right? And the other aspect, on a pretty related note, will be for game publishers, right? So game publishers rely heavily on data, right, on user data. But I think one area they couldn't capture would be the dark channels, right? So a lot of sharing happens at the very personal, private level of like DMs, right, or WhatsApp or Telegram that they can't track, right? But what blockchain tech can do, right, is they can index for these interactions actions. You don't need to know what they are sharing in these dark channels, right? But you can index for what they are doing after they discuss this in the dark channel, in a way bringing it to light, right? And publishers can then tap on all these data, index data, right, to really help the game market way better than they can in the Web2 realm, right? I don't like using this dichotomous term Web2 and Web3, but it really is just about using blockchain tech to improve processes above and beyond what is really out there in the traditional gaming world. So I think these areas are really what will capture value for blockchain tech.
Yeah, and similarly to consumer apps and the focus around that, do you think it needs to be completely abstracted away? Do you think there needs to be like at least like, in my opinion, I think we'll look back in maybe 5 years and just think how did we put up with the current like wallet infrastructure and like lack of account abstraction and stuff? So do you think it needs to get to a point as if the technology is in the back end? Yep, that's great, and it's allowing you to do that, and the trust assumptions come with that. But you don't like the end user doesn't want to have to deal with that. Do you think it has to get to that point before it can like really really take off?
Yeah, I think for sure it has to be that way, because if you don't abstract away just the simplest of things like signing transactions, right, then it's going to be so clunky for the users to play, right? Imagine you have to like sign a transaction every time that you want to cross a breakpoint or you want to receive a reward, right? I think that will really dampen the gaming experience, right? And like you mentioned, I think a lot of the past games, the reason why it didn't take off is because they became like gamified DeFi protocols, right?
Yeah.
There was really no seamless experience. It was really just like yield farming, just clicking buttons and earning yield, right, without the fun experience. And I think you have to abstract away all that, right, to really let the people know that, hey, this is actually a game, right? I think that's really important for if we want like people to really use these protocols.
So I've been following a lot of the kind of protocol announcements and integration announcements, and there's so many. I don't know how you guys keep up. Like, kudos to the BT team. But what's the initial response been like from I suppose protocols reaching out to you guys. They want to be on Mantle. Like, how's that whole process went? Because it feels like everyone wants to be over there, and it's like a really really great sign. And it's quite impressive to see for such a young kind of network to have that much traction.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for that, by the way. We definitely have a lot of inbound, right, like projects, speaking to us, and we love speaking to them and seeing what's being built out there, and, across the verticals in this space, right. And I think that the first wave of people that have built on us, right, we have a great relationship with them, right. We do try to be as hands-on as possible, right, to listen to their feedback and to implement learnings from the difficulties that they experience with building on Mantle, right. Because honestly, these things aren't built, in a week or even months, right, or even years. We know that it's an iterative process, right, and I think we really value all the feedback that these builders, right, amazing builders, have been giving us on a day-to-day basis, right. As mentioned, we try to be really hands-on so that we can continually improve Mantle to the point where like yeah, it becomes a very seamless integration for builders, right. And honestly, I think we're just getting started.
Yeah,
um, we are, I would say we're still really new, right. And I'm really excited for what's to come, actually, because we have many internal plans that we are pushing out, right. We're in no rush to actually okay, I wouldn't want to say no rush, but we firmly believe in the concept of sustainability and security, right. I think that always comes first, no matter what it is, right. Because the users are the ones that make our platform what it is, right. The application layer is what makes the platform what it is. Without these two parties, I would think that we are nothing, right. So
yeah.
sustainability and security has to be prioritized above all else, and I think that's what we are trying to do, right. Yeah.
To expand on that sustainability aspect, how do you guys properly incentivize builders, users, everyone to come, but without kind of over incentivizing? Because I think there's been, like, if we look back at a couple of L2s and like we take it back a step before the L1 kind of rotation that was going on, there was some people just overly incentivizing. Mercenary capital is going to come in and then it's going to leave out the door. So like, how difficult is that fine balance to get?
No, I think it's a fantastic point, right? Because I think that was what really led to the bubble, right? That
Yeah.
burst, right? The valuations are crazy. The amount of money being thrown for no reasons, right?
Crazy.
Was really crazy, right? And I'm so glad that I think we're seeing our space move away from that right now, like you mentioned. So definitely a difficult balance. But I think what we have done, right, is we have tried to innovate, right, in ways that can help us with that. So I think we have this internal product that we have built, right, with Click, called Mantle Journey, right. Essentially, it's a giant indexer, ecosystem-wide indexer, um, that culminates in a scoreboard, right, that tracks activities across protocols and also users, right. In this way, our incentive programs and our reward programs will really be merit based, right. So based on their scores, which is pegged to their on-chain actions and transactions, right, and interactions, we can then give them the commensurate and proportionate kind of incentives. Um, yeah, so in this way, it really is win-win for both sides, right? And I think this is fair, right? There'll be less subjectivity. I wouldn't say none at all, but there'll be way less, right? And yeah, I think this is what we're trying to do as a first step, right? We will iterate, we'll
Yeah.
learn from this process, and we'll try to find, as you mentioned, that best balance eventually in time.
Yeah, that's a really smart way of doing it, actually, because I've seen some where they primarily targeted, let's incentivize the users, then it's some let's just primarily incentivize the applications, and there needs to be the happy medium, but then at the same time it also needs to be the ones who are actually genuinely contributing, as opposed to people just trying to spam to to kind of farm network rewards and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
I can imagine that's a huge task to get right.
yeah, yeah. It definitely isn't easy, right? Because yeah, but I think to us, like, it's worth the effort because it's a huge step forward, right? So if you don't mind, I want to share a bit more about this, right? Because it's something I personally really believe in, right? When
Hmm.
me and DeFi Metro, we came up with this idea, right? It really was for, and I know it's going to sound really cringy, right? But it really is for the greater good of this space, right? Because I think what we have been really lacking, right, is a lack of product market fit when it comes to projects on the application layer, right? We've been building for almost a decade now, right? With a lot of funding, crazy levels of funding, right? But we don't really have, beyond the blue chip DeFi protocols, I don't think you can call any application a true killer app, right? And I think that is because we don't optimize for product market fit, or PMF, right? I think in the past, this space was building a lot of products that were solutions to problems that didn't exist, right? We are retrofitting, trying to force fit blockchain tech into areas that don't really need blockchain tech, right? And the product life cycles of projects, right, was really volatile, right? It was just, explode and then crash and burn, right? The life cycle for a proper product has to be, like more stable, right? It's iterative, right?
Yep.
You iterate, you learn, and then you build again, right? And I think that's something that's quite lacking. I think Mantle journey, right, as an indexer, really is a huge step, huge attempt at, bringing us a huge step forward in that. Because what you get is a lot of user information, on-chain information, as mentioned, right? Not those, privacy related stuff, but really just on-chain interactions and behaviors. And what that can do is then inform, right, protocols of perhaps what users really want and need in this space, and then they can iterate for product market fit from there, right? And what else they can do is they can also identify their true power users, like what you mentioned. In the past, incentives were just thrown at people, just everyone, just thrown at them, right? But with this, so with something like Mantle Journey, right, what we can do is we can target users in a very specific manner, right? Like, as you mentioned, they must really contribute to this protocol. They must really be using this protocol to receive commensurate incentives, right? So protocols can find the power users and iterate properly, from that, because then they will be learning from users that really use them and really care about them, right? And users can then also benefit directly from using these protocols as well.
Yeah, 100%. Is there anything that you'd really like to see being built over there on Mantle at the minute?
It's like a wish list of sorts, like, anything that I want. Okay,
Anything you
wow.
like.
Okay, let me try to think of something off the top of my head. I think that, so this is my personal thesis, right? This is really personal. So I truly believe that the next big protocol will come from the social/consumer fi kind of sector, right? I think you mentioned it as well. I really believe that is where it'll come from, because that's where I see, Web3 elements really solving for huge Web2 pain points, right? I think that one, if we can find a way to build a social chat app, right, or a ticketing application that really solves for the huge problems that Web2 providers are facing, right? I think that will be a huge win for us, and that will be the one that will take blockchain technology forward. In fact, I feel so. I think FriendTech is really a huge step forward in that, right? Probably lots to iterate on, right? But I think that's a great start, right? If I could have anything that I want right now on Mantle, I would say a really successful events ticketing or experience app, right? Because it's not just about ticketing; it's about whole event experience itself. I think that's something that we've spoken for too long on, you know. But I think we've yet to crack the code on that, actually. So
Yeah, it's a huge one, isn't it? For if you like, and that's one of those things where you said, going back to your point of, it benefits both sides of the, maybe it's a creator or the provider and the person who's using it on that end, because the sales pitch to whoever's generating the event to create the ticket is, well, do you want people buying these tickets and then selling them at 5x face value?
yeah,
And if they did want to sell them on, you obviously want the royalty for that, right?
yeah,
And then for the end user, it's like, you obviously want the fairest price and the easiest kind of
yeah,
trusted, verified transaction to get the ticket in your hand. So it's a no brainer. But
yeah,
again, we've speed run the full financial history and created some really complex products
yeah,
and some low hanging fruit that would be of huge benefit just as being completely overlooked.
yeah.
And it's weird.
Exactly right. So I'm glad we line on that, right? Because I think that blockchain tech is really good for certain things only, right? Not for others, right? It's really useful for specific stuff, right? And what you mentioned just now, right? Aligning incentives between stakeholders, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the largest one, if I might.
Yeah, 100%. So we're getting close to 45 minutes. Is there anything you want to kind of wrap up with? Anything that you'd like people to turn their attention towards, or just whatever you want to kind of wrap up with? And as I say, like, I really appreciate you coming on and spending the time. And it's been a great chat. I think we're quite aligned on a lot of stuff. So it's always nice to have your confirmation bias from someone who's a lot smarter than you. So yeah, thanks for that.
No, but yeah, I really love chatting with you, right? I think that even just beyond this podcast, I would love to have a chat with you, as friends and just
Yeah,
discuss all
100%.
things, right? Because that was really I didn't realize it was close to 45 minutes, right? It just really flew past. So thanks for that. I really enjoyed being on this podcast with you, right? I think with regard to Mantle, we love for users to keep up to date with us on our social channels, right? I think we have many exciting initiatives and things that we're going to be announcing in time, right? So do follow us on that. And as mentioned, I think for us really is about sustainability, right, and security, and that's something that we won't take for granted. So we are patient in this, but our time will come, and excited for this to happen.
Perfect. And what I will add on to that is, if you're not following the announcements, you will miss them because there's so many. So you're gonna have to keep tabs, and we'll leave as much information on the Mantle guys and network in the description below. If you're listening on Spotify and head over to YouTube, you can find it all there. But Derek, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it. And open invite whenever you want to come back on. If there's ecosystem updates or anything you want to talk about, there's always an open invite for you guys. And once again, thanks a lot. And everyone listening, thanks very much. And we'll see you next time.
Likewise. Thanks, Sergio. Take care, guys.